Hey, good afternoon. It's Saturday. Is it the 23rd or the 24th? It's the 24th of February, 2018. Yesterday I did one of the videos about 66 minutes long, and I said I was intending to do two of them, and I didn't do this one. And this one's going to be introducing some of the more recently created pages on my website on the Mormon Truth Videos Gospel Topics Hub. It's still at .weebly.com, where it's free. In case anything ever happened to me, it could still exist. So I want to go ahead and discuss the relationship between several of these pages, because they have they have subjects that are very, very intertwined. So we could just go over here and take a look at the menu. Boy, that's a little difficult to read, but I'm not, because I've got a lot of these actually in the home page as hyperlinks, where I'm showing chapters and proposed chapters, and so there are hyperlinks here, and of course I've got videos that are applicable to each particular page or section of the website. So let's go and take a brief tour again, and then we're going to see which ones we're going to get into. And we're going to mention this first one. It's now the first one. It says LDS Apologetics. We believe in being honest, except about our church history. Okay. And that's closely related to some that I've recently put up. You can kind of see going by the ones that I've got up here already. Well, why don't I just go ahead and see what we've got here, okay? Introduction, okay, restoring a stairway to heaven. All right, is that explanatory in and of itself? Let's click on it. Let's just do a brief tour here, catch up, okay? It's been a while. So, restoring a stairway to heaven. Okay. There we go. Stairway to heaven above the San Diego Temple at night. And so, Mormon authority claims for the restoration of the fullness of the gospel in the Book of Mormon and so forth. Restoring a stairway to heaven, a new page on Mormon Truth Videos. So we're talking about the reason for Mormonism, as explained, being that it's proposed that it is restoring an ancient order which was given through the character called Adam 6,000 years ago for the exaltation of men and women. And it's proposed that the Catholic Church, or the Church of the Devil, basically took these priesthood keys and truths away from the world, and that there was a need to restore. That might be an oversimplification, but this really gets into a lot of detail regarding that subject. And if you're offended that I mentioned the Catholic Church, let's not forget that Brigham Young, Orson Pratt, Heber C. Kimball were very clear on that point. Not to mention the obvious definition in chapter 13 of 1 Nephi. Okay, Israel's God calls the magician's apprentice. It's the calling of Joseph Smith, or the little bit about his early history, which isn't quite exactly the way they told it in Sunday school. Joseph Smith's 1823 first vision, that really gets into the historicity of the whole first vision story. There was no first vision story till Joseph Smith's second year before he died, and didn't look like Brigham Young knew about it, or Wilford Woodruff, John Taylor, Heber Kimball, by the statements that they made. Neither did his family. And there wasn't anything going on before 1823 as far as any religious revival activity in Joseph Smith's life. according to everyone that knew him. And we're talking about his family and his associates in the church. We're not talking about some anti-Mormon antagonist. By their works ye shall know them, examining LDS scriptures, the Book of Mormon, the Book of Abraham. So those are all separate pages that have got their own text and their own video content that are drawn from the 300 videos or so that I've done, and here and there's one from somebody else, maybe like a Dan Vogel or someone. Here we've got From Ancient Mysteries. Now these are the three that blend in. The first one had to do with LDS apologetics, and then we're going to talk about From Ancient Mystery Schools through Templars and Masonry to Danites and Luciferian endowments. Okay, so that's about exactly what it's talking about there. And so we're getting into the occult roots of a lot of Mormonism. Most people have no clue as to Luciferianism and what it's comprised of and where it is in our, temple endowments, not just in signs, tokens, keywords, etc., that Brigham Young said we needed to know in order to pass by the angels and the gods who, he said, stand as sentinels and obtain our eternal exaltation, which Joseph Smith took from Luciferian Freemasonry. And I've got some good videos on that where a lot is documented, because I run into a lot of attacks, really, by Freemasons, like on Reddit, that sort of a thing, who used, Freemasonic apologetics to try to separate themselves from Luciferianism, and the evidence is just abundant. And I've done a pretty good job, I think, in documenting that in some of these videos, and it is definitely a part of LDS theology. So, no, not so much in the Book of Mormon. A little bit. There are Luciferian principles in the Book of Mormon, if you know what to look for, if you have an understanding of Luciferian doctrines. If you don't, a lot of the things you find within the church, you think that Joseph Smith just had, some ancient order being restored through the Israelite God. You don't understand terms or where they come from. You don't know about things like the order of Melchizedek, or setting apart, or sealing. Sealing, there are two religions that do sealings, Mormonism and Satanism. Setting apart is witchcraft. You have to set apart a seer stone using magical spells, which Joseph Smith did, and which others did in his time and in his area, when he was a treasure seeker. He was doing that in 1826 still, and performing necromantic arts, sacrificing animals to demons who were supposed to be guarding treasures. And this isn't a bunch of anti-Mormon lies. We can read from his associates, the families that he had association with. There are so many resources, and there are so many diaries you can go through and so forth, but I try to share information that I can document a lot of the time. And we can see the true history and nature of things is much, much different than we get in the correlated lesson materials. So, it's just one thing after another. If you start reading Royal Arch Masonry and so forth, you'll see so much terminology that you thought was uniquely LDS, but it actually comes through Freemasonry, which is rooted in the occult and the Egyptian mystery religion, which is about to get us to where we are going today, showing how these things all blend together. So we got the cult mind control and the kingdoms of Satan and Yahweh, all along the watchtower from Zion to Xenu, CTR, and MK Ultralight. Coercive persuasion is God's method of rescuing lost sheep, because Jesus wants you for a mind control slave. I'm a disciple. Oops, I'm and a sunbeam. So that's all about the use of mind control within Mormonism. And of course, if you're an active Latter-day Saint, you probably have absolutely no clue as to what I'm talking about. You think, oh, that's just nutty. It's some sort of anti-Mormon baloney, some Christian made up How much do you know about mind control? Do you think it's some kind of a fantasy or something out of the movies? Are you unaware of how things worked with, David Koresh? Or maybe L. Ron Hubbard in Scientology? Or maybe the Jehovah's Witnesses? Or maybe Seventh-day Adventists? Or maybe you know a little bit about how it's used in other venues in our society. Or maybe you know little or nothing about it. So many ex-Mormons think they know what they need to about mind control, but they know a little bit. They can talk about the bite model. Do they know how to freeze and unfreeze people? Do they understand how it really works that well? Do they understand how widespread it is? It's not just within LDS religion. It's not just within religion. Basically, our entire society is run by people who understand very well what they're doing. Just like the leaders in the LDS church know what they are doing. I'm talking about at the higher levels. That's why we have NLP masters. And if you know anything about NLP or hypnotic language, cadence, high-level sales techniques, when you notice people like, Gordon B. Hinckley using these things to tell us that we really need to be patriotic and bomb people in Baghdad and equate them with Gadiant and robbers. That the War and Peace talk is something I really broke down and showed some of the techniques that Gordon B. Hinckley was using. He's a trained professional, just like Thomas Monson and Dieter Uchtdorf. These guys, they are experts at neurolinguistic programming. If you recognize it, if you know how to use some of it, and you're acquainted with technique, then it's easy to see. It's easy to be seen in many venues, and these corporate executives for the LDS Church parading as apostles for a Lord that they definitely don't believe in. They don't believe what they preach. You may think they do. When you learn to watch people faking emotion, I saw Meg Pence do it the other night on television. You see, I see so many LDS leaders doing it. When they fake emotion, when they're doing something that they know, when they're talking about something that they know is not true, like Jeffrey Holland and so forth, when he's talking about, how about saying Joseph Smith and Hiram Smith died because they wouldn't deny the Book of Mormon, which he knows is completely false. He was going to be tried for treason and adultery and inciting a riot. Those things that had nothing to do with denying the Book of Mormon. But when you watch Jeffrey, faking emotion with that, trying to look so sincere, because it makes it believable. He's using NLP, and if you know NLP well enough, you will see LDS leaders using it. You will see leaders of other churches using it, especially religious leaders in evangelicals. And why are they all Freemasons or in other occult organizations like the Golden Dawn? In fact, why are the presidents of the countries and of the banks and of so many large corporations involved in the occult? So these things really do link together, because mind control is essential to maintaining control of the people, and certain occult groups find their high-ranking members at the heads of almost every powerful, influential apex in society, whether it's politics, whether it's banking, whether it's business, whether it's agencies that we think are here to protect us, whether we understand that our governments are actually privately owned businesses and can be proven to be such through the comprehensive annual financial reports, which I've showed thanks to the really great work of another fellow who put out a 3-hour video really detailing it, and I've taken some parts of that and used in some of the videos I've got in this very section. So we're going to look at that. Why do we have asking you questions really helps. You need to think about some things. You've been conditioned by people saying, "Oh, that's just radical, right-wing, people saying crazy things," and just ignore it. Just stay on LDS.org. Just stay on JW.org. It's Satan trying to get you. They use the same techniques in the news as they use in church with the various religions to scare people from looking into things more carefully. They like to characterize people as anti-Mormons and apostates. And if we listen to the leaders of multiple churches doing the same thing, and it's always saying it's Satan, it makes it a little easier to wake up. So what did I write here? And I'm going to talk about Donald Trump and Billy Graham, and all of these guys are eulogizing. Why is Billy Graham being honored? Why is this man being honored by so many different people in places of power on the television set right now? Why is he in the Rotunda? Why is his body there, Is that not really an occult temple? Are not all temples really from the occult? Where did Mormon temples come from? You think you know, don't you? Why is Donald Trump talking about him being such a great guy? Donald Trump. Isn't he pretty much the ultimate heathen? I mean, wasn't he basically a swinger? Have you read any of his stuff like 20 years ago? Talking about stuff going on with his, business associates' wives. It's been pretty popularized what we heard about, the kind of way he has treated women as far as extremely inappropriately touching women that he is not married to, other people's wives, or whether you're married to someone else or not. Donald Trump seems to think he's got the right to do whatever the hell he wants to basically defile women, using Mormon terminology there. He has no respect for someone's dignity if he's going to reach underneath the dinner table and grab a woman in an area that he has no business touching. Is Bill Clinton any better? Was John F. Kennedy any better? All these men are adulterers, yet Billy Graham was their spiritual advisor. George Bush Sr., probably George Bush, probably GW too. I mean, man after man. And look at the speech Billy Graham gave on December 6th, 1966, or 12/6/66. What a coincidence, huh? Look at his relationship with these guys, and look at their connections to the occult. Look at all the Freemasons involved here. Billy Graham, supposed to be 33rd degree Freemason. I've read plenty about that. I don't know if that can actually be verified. But you can see him giving Masonic handshakes to other people. Like, I saw one here. He's giving a Masonic handshake to Oral Roberts. In fact, on some of the videos I've done, we've got a whole lot of that sort of thing being shown, and it gets pretty interesting when we see these world leaders using Masonic handshakes that we may recognize from the Temple Endowment. Well, here's Billy Graham and Oral Roberts right there. Okay, that's Robert Schuller, another Freemason Christian leader. So we start look at the grip here. Okay, you recognize that from the temple? Okay, yeah, you should. That's Freemasonry. The grips had in the temple are taken from the Blue Lodge of Freemasonry. The grips of the entered apprentice, fellow craft, and master mason are used within the temple, given different names and called special tokens with different names. But we see these guys exchanging Masonic grips time after time. Some you recognize and from the temple, and some you will not. And we have leaders using occult or satanic symbols all the time, and I've shown plenty of it in other videos. I'm not really going to get into that at this point. I'm going to just run a couple of screens here from, something here as I'm talking. But Billy Graham, what we'll find is associated with so many Freemasons. The birds of a feather flock together. You're probably hearing that kind of a thing in the news these days, with all of Donald Trump's associates running into trouble. But it's being touted how Billy Graham was able to, be special to Democrats and Republicans, reaching across party lines, people of different faiths. And why is that? Well, because Freemasonry is a brotherhood, and it is a religion, and it does have so much. The leaders of various power centers are Freemasons. So we've got Gordon B. Hinckley and Dick Cheney, and yeah, you know that grip. It is a little bit obfuscated there, but I got another shot of that one that's not obfuscated. Let's kind of move it ahead here. And we got Thomas Monson and George Bush there. I mean, I've shown this stuff before. Now, do you know that grip? You know that grip. Come on. Yeah, let's pause it. You know that grip. Don't you? So was George Bush Mormon? Are they in the temple? No. So George Bush is known to be skull and bones. But, this is Freemasonry. And Freemasonry is a Luciferian-based religion. Okay, the apologists will tell you that it's not, but there's plenty of information to back that up. Plenty of documentation. And I've done that, but in this section that we're going to see, it's going to be about that sort of thing. So this video here is really introductory to this section. That's really the purpose of this video, is to be an introductory thing. Excuse me, I want to be right here back in Puffin, don't I? And am I on the right thing? Oh my, am I making life difficult here? I am. Okay. There we are. Going to Puffin. Let's move this junk over. And I really just wanted to back out of that and take a look at some other pages that I have kind of prepared here. So this is the page right here on the website. Secret combinations in LDS scripture and modern urban legend status of the Illuminati and the Danites, basically through mind control. In this section, I'll endeavor to paint with a broader brushstroke a larger view of a picture in which we see the roles of various themes of this website brought together in one integrated, purposeful union. And by so doing, I may likely incur the purposeful negative labeling used by manipulation experts, as well as those who unwittingly parrot conditioned responses with which most of us have been programmed to elicit by those who help pull the strings of the puppet masters who manage their human victims of mind control tactics throughout society, as administered not only by leaders of religious and irreligious cults, but through other companies such as media companies and also agencies and governing bodies, which they have conditioned us to believe a representative government of, by, and for the commoner. Alright, so I'm not going to read this whole thing, but I'm going to show some of the videos that I've actually got in here, and you can read what it says. But yeah, mentioning Billy Graham here. So, and I'm showing the scriptures here where we start, seeing secret combinations discussed, which really do a good job of describing Freemasonry. And a lot of members of the church think this is, this is just divinely inspired, but I tend to show otherwise. So, Joseph Smith and those who may have assisted him in creating and publishing the Book of Mormon, for instance, and the inspired version of the Bible reveal a lot of things about Freemasonry. And I want to, I'll just give us a little something here. Okay, Lucifer is God of Freemasonry, and I've shown this kind of stuff in LDS, Masonic apologists, try to blame all this stuff on the taxi hoax, but it is throughout high-level Masonic literature, and it's throughout Morals and Dogma, and then they try to, degrade Albert Pike, and that's just BS. But the videos I've done on that particular thing on Masonic apologetics and the LDS Temple are found in that section, this section, and you can see plenty of documentation. But let's look at just a couple of things. Okay, I'll just show a couple of things to give a little validation to what I'm saying here. So here we're going to be quoting Manly Palmer Hall here. Okay, he's a 33rd degree Scottish Rite Freemason, and he's written a lot of books, and he's a great speaker, and I've listened to some of his talks. It's pretty interesting, and he knows the occult very well. In fact, that video I did, the Babylonian Roots of, of America, was rooted in some of his teachings. When the Mason learns that the key to the warrior on the block is the proper application of the dynamo of living power, he has learned the mystery of his craft. The seething energies of Lucifer are in his hands, and before he may step forward, onward and upward, he must prove his ability to properly apply energy. Think about how you might do that. Here he talks about, now I hereby promise the great spirit Lucifer, prince of demons. Okay, that's actually Eliphas Levi. He's another 33rd degree Freemason. And then Albert Pike has so many quotes. And, they try to degrade this Lucifer the light bearer thing, but, what I really like here, he talks about the pure Luciferian doctrine, but the important thing is that he does tell us that Lucifer is God, or a co-equal God with, the Hebrew God Adonai. Adonai just is Hebrew for my Lord. Okay, so it's one of the things that Yahweh was called. He was called Elohim, or that's the God or the gods, and Adonai means my Lord. Those are Hebrew terms, so that people wouldn't have to say the name, Yahweh, or YHWH, however you want to say it, the Tetragrammaton. So that which we must say to a crowd is, we worship God, but it is the God that one adores without superstition. To you, sovereign grand inspectors, that means 33rd degree Freemasons, in case you don't know, of the high degrees, or sovereigns general, we say this, that you may repeat it to the brethren of the 32nd, 31st, and 30th degrees. The Masonic religion should be, by all of us initiates of the high degrees, maintained in the purity of the Luciferian doctrine. If Lucifer were not God, would Adonai, whose deeds prove his cruelty, perfidy, and hatred of man, barbarism and repulsion for science, would Adonai and his priests calumniate him? Yes, Lucifer is God, and unfortunately Adonai is also God. For the eternal law is that there is no light without shade. Pay attention to this, because you've learned this in the temple. No beauty without ugliness, no white without black. For the absolute can only exist as two gods, darkness being necessary to the statue and the brake to the locomotive. In other words, think of what Eve said in the garden, and think of what Lucifer or Satan said in the garden, that, they must experience, pleasure and pain, light and darkness, good and evil, all that sort of a thing. These are Luciferian doctrines, as you can see. Albert Pike is discussing. So he says, thus the doctrine of Satanism is a heresy, and the true and pure philosophical religion in the belief is Lucifer, the equal of Adonai. But Lucifer, God of light and God of good, is struggling for humanity against Adonai, the God of darkness and evil. So there we have a pretty strong statement that Freemasonry at the highest levels is the pure Luciferian religion, and Lucifer is the good God, and the Hebrew God is the bad God. And I'm not arguing that the Hebrew God's not a bad God. If we read the Old Testament, he's very cruel. There's no doubt about that, and Albert Pike is well aware of that, and that's true. But Joseph Smith, being a Freemason, when he, for 6 weeks, when he, or 7, when he went ahead and published the Book of Abraham so that the blacks couldn't come in the temple, so that Freemasonry's segregation wouldn't be violated, and placed Freemasonry in the Endowment, made Lucifer out to be a bad guy. And in Freemasonry, he's not a bad guy, he's the good guy. So Joseph Smith uses the Christian definition for Lucifer in the Endowment, equates him with Satan, and kind of really mixes things up for a Freemason. And so he's getting these signs and tokens that Brigham Young, another Freemason, said we must have in order to enter into the kingdom of God in the highest degrees. He's getting them from Luciferians. And then he's saying Lucifer's a bad guy when Freemasonry says Lucifer's the ultimate good guy, the ultimate good God. So how does that make you feel about Joseph Smith receiving the endowment by revelation from whoever he says God is? You know, he uses the word Jehovah for a premortal Jesus Christ, and of course Jehovah was invented by an occultist Catholic monk in the 13th century by the name of Raymond Martini. So it's an anachronism when we find it in the Book of Mormon. It's an anachronism when we find it in the Book of Abraham. Calling Abram Abraham is an anachronism. If you are familiar with the story in Genesis, he just fell all over himself making ridiculous errors in the Book of Abraham, trying to make it look authentic, but he completely screwed things up. The Chaldeans, they weren't around for another 1,000 years. So many mistakes there. Egypt, that which is forbidden. The word didn't even exist at that time. It's not a word the Egyptians used. It's a comedy of errors, actually, if you study the subject matter. And I don't want to get too far off into that, but everything in that endowment is just Joseph Smith twisting Luciferianism, coming straight out of Freemasonry and other, occult traditions, and the whole premortal existence, all that Swedenborgian stuff. Who was Emanuel Swedenborg was a spiritualist, and Joseph Smith got all that stuff from him. And then he's got stuff in Genesis and Christianity, mixes all this stuff together, and we've got this mishmash. When you understand where these things come from, or if you're familiar with the disciplines or those who teach these doctrines, just as if I was saying, if you are familiar enough with the occult, that you recognize language like setting apart, dedicating temples, this is all from Freemasonry and witchcraft, magic, and all this Melchizedek stuff, grand councils and high councils and order of Melchizedek. I mean, one thing after another comes from the occult. The more occult material you read, the more you just go, well, that sounds awfully familiar. I saw that in the Doctrine and Covenants. Manly Palmer Hall, Secret Teachings of All Ages. It's got a lot of, it's got references which are just really useful to become familiar with, because you'll see where this comes from. And so these guys have got a brotherhood, and that's why Donald Trump, an absolute heathen, is honoring Billy Graham like he's something special in Christianity. And that's why Billy Graham is comfortable with all these adulterers, because they're all scumbags, and Billy Graham included. And when we look at the religious leaders throughout Christianity, you look at Billy Graham, Robert Schuller, Oral Roberts, Ken Copeland, Benny Hinn, you're going to find a lot of Freemasonry. And Freemasonry is Luciferianism as you get to the higher levels. And like all of these organizations, they've got front organizations. They've got fronts and programs that look really good for people to believe that they're just wonderful charitable people, because they do some charitable things, and that's part of Luciferianism. The balance, the good, good balancing evil, that sort of a thing. It is a religion, and so you see the Shriners Hospital. I mean, you've got to be a 33rd degree Freemason to be in the Shriners. I could be wrong. Pretty sure you do. So you got the Shriners Hospital, or the Catholics. You got St. Jude, and so when we look at the leaders of our country, which is just a company really, and we look at the religious leaders that promote patriotism, so that the military-industrial complex and the bankers, the pharmaceutical industries, that the cities, states, counties, and pension funds are all invested in as privately owned companies, and as is provable, and as is proved in the videos in that section regarding corporate governance, you will see the financial proof that these are actually privately owned companies, and they profit when companies that they are invested in through stock do millions and hundreds of millions and billions and even trillions of dollars totally. But I'm talking when I'm talking $120 trillion of investment by like 2010, probably estimated, by these entities that we thought were representative government, that's strewn about through all sorts of investment in various corporations. But when we find that they're invested in companies like Boeing, Northrop Grumman, Lockheed Martin, DuPont, on and on, Bechtel, Halliburton, Kellogg Brown and Root, we see how profitable war is for them. And so there's a complete and total conflict of interest. And so when we've got these Luciferian Freemasons at the head of religion and government and banking and these corporations, elected, boards of governors and in the banks, and elected, directors of corporations through the power of the shareholder vote, which they exercise, and thereby control corporate policy and the boards of directors in both publicly held and privately held corporations, including the 501c3s, meaning the churches, is what I'm focusing on. They're not every 501c3 is a church. John DeLunn's got a 501c3, doesn't he? With Mormon stories, but they have tax-exempt status, and they got to toe the line, and they're going to profit because they've got investments in these companies. So war is very profitable, and patriotism is important. It has been since Babylon and Egypt. You've always got your Chaldeans there. You've always got your priest class supporting the government, and so telling us that it's God's will, whoever the God is, whether it's the God of Egypt or the God of Egypt of America that pretends to be, the Christian God set up by these occultists who framed the United States. You will find the same structure is there, that every country tells their people through their priests that God essentially set up their country. It was divine will, and they're very special. And if you get outside the United States and you notice it in other countries, you'll just say, well, this sounds like a familiar story. Because it's common to many, if not all, countries, that you will find that, you're taught that it's God's will to be patriotic. And that's just what the leaders want. That's why they give tax-exempt status to their brethren who support them as the Amalekites upon the towers. So I go into some detail in the videos on there. And so, I've just shown you just a few things to, show that the Freemasonic apologetics is misleading us, because we truly see the seething energies of Lucifer are in his hands. I mean, it's quote after quote from these high-level occultists who are Freemasons, and that's what we have at the head of every influential aspect of society, not just in the Virginia Company, aka the United States, with its new name. Instead of being a London Corp, now it's a District of Columbia Corporation. If you understand who Columbia is, that might explain a few things a little bit as well too. So they want to call names. They want to scare you out of actually investigating. I've done a lot of investigating over the years, and no, it's not just some wacko stuff. It is very helpful to them to have controlled opposition and to create discredit, like they've done in so many ways, by giving us part of the truth and then putting a spin on it. So you ex-Mormons that have left the church and are liberals at this point, you're still being manipulated. You Mormons who are still in the church and Republicans, you're still being manipulated. Partisan politics is a matter of manipulation, and what you find out is, just like Billy Graham was the buddy of Democrats and Republicans, many of whom were occultists, probably all were occultists, many were Freemasons in the powers of the presidency of the United States, and probably all were adulterers. What you find is that they're all buddies at the top, and they're all friends behind the scenes. That's why you see, Bush, Senior, and Clinton, working together, and Jimmy Carter, in the Council on Foreign Relations, and all these Save the World foundations. And if you really look at what goes on, look at the sexual scandals you've got with all these presidents, this sexual slavery that's, talked about, and you don't find. They know what not to say about each other. You don't find Trump blowing the whistle on Clinton on anything really bad. No, it's just, minor stuff compared to, sex slaves and that sort of a thing. But if Billy Graham was a man of righteousness, would he really be, hanging out with Bill Clinton? Seriously? Or Donald Trump, talking to him? I mean, these guys are as bad as bad as they get by, by any sort of standard for morality, and yet they're buddies. Look at the defense that, look how kindly Gordon B. Hinckley spoke of Bill Clinton in interviews that he was having. Was it with Larry King, or was it the other guy? He would say, he's tremendously talented. He'd say all these nice things about it, Bill Clinton, but then he'd say, but he's got to be held accountable. Does that really sound like a man with real standards talking that way about someone as filthy as Bill Clinton? So the closer we look, the more we see the occult connection and the brotherhood that exists. And yes, they all know what the hell they're doing as far as the arts of persuasion are when they're in these positions of power. You think you need a college education to do certain things in society? Well, you need to understand the arts of manipulation and persuasion to be chosen for leadership through the Brotherhood. You need to be a master of NLP, and you see guys like Donald Trump showing us, how it's done. You see you see these guys using hypnotic language and hypnotic repetition, and there's Billy Graham again. Who's he with this time? Oh, look at that. You know that, huh? You know that grip? Maybe you don't, but it's Masonic. Okay. So, they're not doing it just with religious leaders. Hey, what's Trump doing? Pulling the 666. And look, just for fun, you know, they like to put things out in the open and then mock it and just say, oh, isn't it crazy to think, you know, isn't it crazy to think these people are just paranoid? Like the LDS apologists that say, oh, you know, there wasn't any such thing as Satanism when we put the pentagrams up on the temple. Really? Well, why was Albert Pike talking about it back in the 1800s then? At the same time they're putting that stuff up on the temples, right? They want to blame it all, LDS apologists blame it all on Anton LaVey, a 33rd degree Freemason, you know, head of the Church of Satan in Los Angeles, but he was a disciple of they were both disciples of Aleister Crowley at OTO, Ordo Templi Orientis in Los Angeles. Also another 33rd degree Freemason. Oh my, what a coincidence. Why are these guys all Freemasons? Now, who we got here? Robert Schuller. Oh, I think I already showed this in Billy Graham, Sonic Handshake. And I got just tons of those in those other videos showing it, whether it's the Queen or it's Thomas Monson and George Bush or whoever it is, you know, Hinckley and Dick Cheney. They're all giving Masonic grips, and they're all pushing each other's agendas. And it's, you know, when they're throwing these Illuminati signs and stuff. Oh yeah, I wanted to show, let's look at 3 Mormons doing the same thing, pulling this mockery. They're mocking, they're putting something out in the open, and then just mocking it. Here we go. Let's get a little volume here.
It's like a funeral march. Yeah, what are you trying to say?
Hey, this is really awkward.
Okay. Yeah. Now, Ian, what was your favorite moment on the show? That's gotta be the moment where we realized that our show was reaching audiences in Europe. Yeah. Germanic peoples. Yes. We're wearing wooden shoes, living in windmills? No, that's not what I'm saying. Being on Tree Mormons is kind of meta. It's Irish. It's my little Irish accent. Because, you know, my name is very Gaelic. Ian James Forsyth. I don't think I've ever said the full name on the show. But now you know. Yeah. Lucky people get to know my name. These are very lucky people. Just kidding. Yeah, so it's the Irish accent. They're very lucky when they're always...
So let's watch for a couple of things. They'll use some techniques here. These guys actually do know what they're doing. They're not innocent young men. They use certain techniques. They use layered messaging. They put things out there and then mock them. They use assumptive statements that they know are false. They use terminology to discredit others who are presenting factual information. They'll talk about, he'll say, who is your favorite troll? He's going to name a guy named David Stiles, who's a Christian. And so right away, you know, a troll, you know, what do we think? There's always the negative connotation. Critics, trolls, anti-Mormons, apostates. And he'll find a way to mock him. And then they'll mock the whole Illuminati thing and make a big joke out of it. So you just think, oh, it's just, you know, some idiocy. Kind of funny that they do that, though, because they're using the techniques that professionals use to bring discredit and just mockery and associate things with, you know, things that that we think have no credibility, so that we won't bother to investigate. And all I'm saying is, do the investigation, and we'll see who's telling the truth. And I've tried to make that easy through the videos and through the website as to who's telling the truth in things pertaining mostly to the LDS Church, but as a microcosm in the societal control exercised by these guys, because we've got Freemasons at the head of all of these religions, or at least they're associated with Freemasonry. They are occultists, whether you're talking, you know, SDA, JW, LDS, Scientology, one after another, Moonies. They're all occultists. They're all helping each other. And, you find the most horrible pedophilia rings going on in all of these high-level things, because it's part of the religion and the culture that they actually do practice while they're peddling stuff that they believe not in to the gullible. And if you think that sounds too far-fetched, follow the evidence and you'll see, what did Glenn Pace, Bishop Glenn Pace say, from the presiding bishopric? What was his memo about, satanic ritual abuse, and it was involving the LDS church leaders?
Doing your cereal. What is abuse? That was such low-hanging fruit. Really? You're really gonna take a joke like that? Lucky Charms? I get it. Yeah. It's low-hanging fruit. Easy. You just said. It's not low-hanging fruit. It's low-hanging cereal. That was even more stupid.
That hurt.
Okay, keep going. Who is your favorite troll? David Styles. David Styles. Davey. It's just Styles. There was a moment where I think he brought up we were like Illuminati or something. No, he didn't say that, but it felt like that. Yeah, it was kind of cool. It was like, well, I'm up there with Beyonce and Barack Obama, Illuminati, Yeah, we're not a part of the Illuminati. People think they are the wrong. Now, question. Look, they did it! The Illuminati! Okay. But my favorite troll, David.
Okay, so why would they do that? Why would they do that? Why would they put that out there and mock it? They mock all the same things that the people running News Corp knock, or CNN, or the church. Funny, they mock all the same things that the Freemasons mock because they don't want us to investigate. That's the common thread. That's why you have people that are known to be just absolute heathens like Donald Trump or Bill Clinton associating with one who's supposed to be a representative of the Christian God. And if you saw on Fox News today just how they were blathering over Billy Graham and some of the things God called him forth and all this just garbage, and when you realize what scum these people actually are and how they exploit and abuse the vulnerable through their satanic religion, it's mind-blowing. But we're conditioned to think that that's just nuts, The facts prove otherwise. They really do. And if you notice the inconsistencies in the patterns of association, then your mind begins to become open to realize, hey, these guys are working together. Why would they be hanging out with each other? Why would someone who's an admitted swinger, basically, like Donald Trump, be talking about how great Billy Graham is, who's supposed to represent, a God that says you shouldn't be fornicating, having adultery, in your life, doing your partner's wives and stuff like that. I mean, according to Christian doctrine or LDS doctrine, Donald Trump should be burning in hell, as well as Bill Clinton and pretty much every other U.S. president that I can think of, probably. Find one that wasn't an adulterer. Come on, can you think of one? Can you? Probably was one somewhere. But they're kind of like the Lamanites. They're just really hard to find.
Dial. He was great. There was one point where he said he was a truther. He is a truther.
Oh, isn't that funny? Truther.
My favorite part is like, David, why are you vehemently arguing with us? Because I'm a truther. And I'm like,
a truther? Are we mocking truth? Are we mocking truthers? Are we mocking Mormon truth? See how that all kind of falls in together, The mockery is an important part of what they're doing. They're degrading the credibility of this guy, who's actually pretty accurate in a lot of things that he has to say. I've seen some of the comments that he's made, and he's articulated the fact that Mormonism is filled with its own contradiction, and so they have no defense when it comes to facts. So what they have to do is mock him, which is what Quacku tried to do with Mormon informant on the seer stone video, and just look at the rude and horrible things that Kwaku was saying, and he couldn't defend anything. So he avoided the issues. He pivoted, more than Hillary Clinton in a debate, and he used mockery because the facts wouldn't support his position. And I did a video on that, so you can find that one in there. It has to do with 3 Mormons talking about the use of the brown seer stone to channel the words for the Book of Mormon, as we're told. I really don't think that's what happened, but that's the story that Emma and David Whitmer spread, and what was accepted in Mormonism for a while, and then they decided it didn't look good, so they hid the seer stone from us and gave us pictures in the ensign of Joseph Smith carefully examining golden plates, which, according to Emma and David Whitmer, weren't even in the room. So, enough of that's come forth that they've gone ahead and put it on LDS.org with a picture of the stone that they took out of the first presidency vault, and said, yeah, it is the one he used when he was treasure seeking. They declined to mention that it's witchcraft and that it had to be dedicated through magic spells and witchcraft. If you look up the spells, you can see how it's done, and they're, a matter of setting it apart. Something we talk about in callings and in the priesthood, which comes from witchcraft.
Literally nothing I have said is like controversy. I'm just talking to you, but I need to let people know that this is of the devil. And I'm like, okay.
Right, David Styles.
See, that's probably the only truther you know.
Yeah,
I've never heard of a truther. So
yeah, that's because he's the only...
Okay, so they make David Styles out to be a nutcase, but they're totally reasonable, right? See how they do? So they discredited him, when actually, if you looked at the evidence he presented versus, whatever subject matter was being discussed in those videos, you'll probably find that he's pretty accurate.
Someone that is, do you know what? The truther.
Well, most people who call themselves truthers are crazy. They're crazy people.
It's like when someone
There we go.
says, I think people need to realize that we all come from different paths and just have different modes of repentance. That person's doing something terribly wrong.
Alright.
It is so true. It's like...
Is this possibly fake laughter? I mean, I'm not laughing. Maybe, that's just me, but did it really seem that funny? Or are these guys employing NLP? Are they faking emotion? Are they faking funniness even? As they try to sell us that these things are just ridiculously funny? Because, like I said, I'm not laughing. Are you? Just like when we see them tear up, on at the pulpit and in general conference, pay attention. They're using NLP a lot of the time.
Someone is like, I'm a truther. There's something inside of them that's like, I'm really confused about life.
Yeah.
I want to leave a brief testimony.
All right.
Because you always testify in the show, and you just kind of silence me.
Yeah. Anyway, I ate a while ago, and I don't want to have to vomit watching too much more of their stuff. So anyway, that's why these things all go together, because using mind control is a part and parcel of controlling people's thoughts and actions and beliefs, and it is very much part of what is done in the church. And when we find out the truth about the Luciferian religion, there are so many facts that we can really examine and notice that it's ridiculous that we have actually believed that these Luciferians are, some kind of righteous, wonderful leaders connected with a deity. And that's what the Jehovah's Witnesses are taught about their leaders. That's what the Scientologists are taught about their leaders. That's what the Seventh-day Adventists are taught about theirs, because they're all the one true church. And the more we listen to them talk about their wonderful spirit-guided leaders and how Satan's trying to draw you away by taking you away from JW.org or LDS.org to these horrible places where they're going to drag you down by showing you factual evidence that contradicts the story they've been telling you. I just want to say that if you have to protect your belief system by ignoring or hiding from factual information, or information that might be factual, that you should have the mental capacity to evaluate and fact check for yourself rather than be frightened away by fear-mongering tactics, then what does that tell you about your religion? It tells you it's based upon deception and mind control because they need to keep you in the dark in order to keep you in the pews and your checks and money orders and cash coming in. Okay, well, please do get into the website because there's really a lot of good information in the website, which I'm trying to relocate and think maybe I somehow must have obfuscated. I got so many web pages open here, and yeah, that's about the long and the short of it, people. And have to say it's time for Dodger Game to go out here, and I really wanted to end with something from the website here, so maybe the editing part will at least give us a picture to finish up with, because I somehow managed to take me out of it. And so the page I was talking about there happened to be Secret Combinations in LDS Scripture. And it's got some really interesting and factually supported information that can start you finding out how they weave the story. I was going to add a couple of videos. That's this one I'm going to add in there, because we truly do have occultists leading in every aspect of society. See what Donald Trump's doing there? How does he know that stuff? Why is he doing that? Why is he giving us the all-seeing eye 666 symbols, huh? Why is Thomas Monson shaking George Bush's hand with a Masonic grip that you know from the temple? And why is Lucifer watching? Yeah, right. And why is the Statue of Liberty really look like Melania? Okay, so we got from Apollos to Semiramis, Columbia, Diana, Isis, Moroni, whatever. Who are these? Who are these folks? And why does she stand in the bay as the queen of the night? Watch that one and find out. Mormonism's Babylonian mystery, school roots, and America's manifest destiny as the new Atlantis. Dodger Game out.